You didn't become emotionally controlled because you were strong. You became emotionally controlled because, at some point, you had no choice. There was a moment, quiet, forgettable to everyone else, where you learned something crucial. Feeling too much was unsafe. Expressing too much had consequences. Needing too much made you a problem. So you adapted. You learned to stay calm when others erupted. You learned to stay composed when chaos filled the room. You learned to regulate not just your emotions, but everyone else's. And people admired you for it. They called you mature, level-headed, strong under pressure. But what they didn't see was the cost. Because emotional control is a double-edged skill. What once protected you now isolates you. What once kept you safe now keeps you distant. You don't explode. You don't break down. You don't lose control. Instead, you disappear quietly behind competence, restraint, and self-discipline. This is the paradox. The more control you gain over your emotions, the less permission you give yourself to feel alive. And somewhere along the way, survival replaced connection. Composure replaced intimacy. Control replaced truth. This video is not here to shame emotional control. It's here to expose the laws beneath it, so you can finally decide whether you're still surviving or ready to live. Emotional control, in its pathological form, is not emotional intelligence. It is emotional containment under threat. Psychologically, this archetype forms in environments where emotional expression was met with punishment, dismissal, parentification, or emotional unpredictability. Let's name the forces at work. 1. Emotional neglect, not abuse, not violence, but the absence of attunement. Your feelings weren't mirrored, they weren't held, they weren't metabolized with you. So your nervous system learned, my emotions must be handled alone. 2. Hypervigilance. You became exquisitely sensitive to shifts in tone, mood, energy. Your body learned to scan before it felt, to predict before it expressed, to regulate the room instead of yourself. This keeps the sympathetic nervous system chronically activated, calm on the surface, tense underneath. 3. Avoidant attachment connection became conditional. You learned closeness required control. Needs felt risky. Dependence felt dangerous. So you bonded through usefulness, stability, and emotional containment, not vulnerability. Neurologically, this reshapes the default mode network, the part of the brain responsible for self-referential thought. Your internal monologue became managerial, not compassionate, observing, regulating, correcting, instead of feeling. You didn't lose your emotions. You put them on lockdown. Carl Jung warned, what we do not make conscious will direct our lives, and we will call it fate. The cost of emotional control is subtle, which makes it devastating. You lose spontaneity first, then softness, then desire. Not because you don't feel, but because feeling feels inefficient, unsafe, unproductive. You trade authenticity for acceptance, truth for peace, need for dignity. And slowly, invisibly, grief accumulates. Not loud grief, not dramatic grief. Quiet grief. The grief of never being fully known. The grief of being admired but not understood. The grief of rest that never reaches your bones. Seneca wrote that the greatest suffering comes not from pain, but from resistance to pain. You resist by controlling, by intellectualizing, by staying composed while something inside you begs to exhale. Rilke once said, perhaps all the dragons in our lives are princesses waiting to see us act, just once, with beauty and courage. But emotional control trains you to slay the dragon instead of listening to it. Your core fear is not weakness, it is exposure. Being seen in need, being seen without armor, being seen without value to offer. So you stay capable, you stay regulated, you stay alone. This childhood adaptation does not disappear. It matures. It professionalizes. It becomes your personality. You might struggle with intimacy. You crave depth but freeze when emotions surface. You're present but unreachable. Overfunction in relationships. You manage, stabilize, and support, while silently resenting that no one does the same for you. Suppress anger until it leaks out sideways through withdrawal, sarcasm, emotional numbness. Tie self-worth to composure. If you're not calm, capable, or controlled, you feel like you're failing. Have difficulty receiving care. Being helped feels like loss of power or danger. Feel exhausted despite having it together, because control consumes energy constantly. These are not flaws. They are coping mechanisms that outlived their usefulness. Unlearning begins with awareness. You don't dismantle emotional control by forcing vulnerability. You soften it by creating safety. You teach your nervous system that expression no longer equals threat, that slowness is allowed, that messiness won't cost you love, that rest does not require collapse. Healing does not mean losing control. It means expanding capacity. Inner child work asks, what did I need that I learned to suppress? Shadow work asks, what parts of me did I exile to stay safe? Nervous system regulation teaches the body what the mind already knows. You are no longer trapped. Practically, practice naming feelings without fixing them. Allow trusted people to see you unfinished. Choose softness where survival once ruled. Not every emotion needs control. Some need companionship. The goal is not to become reckless or raw all the time. The goal is integration. As Jung said, wholeness is not achieved by cutting off a portion of one's being, but by integration of the opposites. You don't need to be fixed, you need to be felt. Because the most powerful form of control is knowing when to let go. If this resonated, share it with someone who lives behind composure. Like, subscribe, stay. The goal is not to be fixed, but to become whole.